One of the things I distinctly remember from elementary school was the day we all came back from winter break in the 4th grade. It was snowing and we all walked in filled with energy. Everyone was beaming, just waiting to brag about what gift Santa had gotten us that year. I smiled as I said hi to one of my favorite teachers of all time, who I still love to this day. She had us all stand around in a circle, and we shared about what we did over break to the class. One boy talked about the impressive gingerbread house he and his friends built. One girl talked about how she went caroling with her family. One boy went on and on and on about the expensive toy helicopter his parents bought for him. After I shared, my teacher gave me a look. It was a mix of impressed and baffled. And I knew I hadn't said anything extravagant, so I was left confused. She followed up by saying, "Danielle, you're so proper. Did you know that?" This was one of my first experiences of being a model minority. Model minority, let's take a look at what this means. The term model minority, first used by sociologist William Peterson, is often used to describe someone who's a part of a minority but rises above or stands apart from the negative biases that that minority may receive. In this oration, we'll take a look at the model minority concept and talk about how this creates unconscious bias which perpetuates stereotypes. Then we'll talk about where these stereotypes come from and how they get reinforced from pop culture. Then finally, we'll look at ways in which we can overcome our unconscious bias. The model minority can refer to someone's gender, religion, sexuality, or any marginalized group of people, but it's most often used to describe somebody's race. If you're a model minority in the Black community, it means you're a bit different from Black folk. You're meant to be the face of all Black people and represent Black culture, yet you're still expected to distance yourself from typical Black behavior. You're not like other Blacks, yet you're still Black enough for a white person to throw out your name while talking about equal rights or diversity. You're the hip urban teacher for white folk. You hold knowledge of all things Black because you understand Black people. You're just not like them. You're better than that. Take another look at what it was that my teacher said to me. "Danielle, you're so proper." Many people would hear this and think, how could someone take offense to that? She just gave you a compliment. But even at that age, I knew that there were other people in my class who were smarter than me, more mature for their age, more well-spoken. My teacher knew it too. Yet I was the only one she ever felt the need to point it out to. It's no secret that Black people aren't expected to be properly educated or speak with correct grammar or be in any way smart. So when we're seen to be these things, white people often feel the need to point it out to us, as if us being not as dumb as they thought we'd be is some type of compliment. I'm sure you all remember when Joe Biden infamously referred to Barack Obama as articulate in the New York Observer in 2007. In fact, his exact words were, "You got the first mainstream African-American who's articulate and bright and clean and a nice-looking guy." Just weeks ago, the billionaire presidential candidate Mike Bloomberg referred to his fellow candidate Cory Booker as well-spoken. Cory Booker graduated from Stanford University, Yale Law School, was a Rhodes Scholar, and is currently a US Senator. Yeah, he's well-spoken. These may not be examples of the evil, explicit, white hoods and fire hoses racism, but they're harmful nonetheless. Comments such as, "You're so articulate," or "You're so well-spoken," are not compliments and will never flatter us, especially when they're mixed with a shocked facial expression and the implication that we've been underestimated before we've even been spoken to. It's these everyday, normalized, well-meant biases that hurt, even when well-intentioned. So what causes this systemic pattern, you may be wondering? I knew my teacher. She was extremely nice and smart and socially aware. So what makes even the most good-hearted of people fall into this pattern? The quick and easy answer is to just say that racism is the problem. Racism needs to end, and then this will all stop. And while we can all agree that racism is bad, I'd like to suggest that maybe this issue goes a bit deeper than that. Consider this. This country was built off of racism and white supremacy, and it still runs on these things. From slavery to segregation to lingering widespread discrimination, racism has been around for as long as we've been alive, and we do not know a world without it. It's engraved into our minds, and this way of thinking is built in with us, whether we'd like to admit it or not. Because of this, each and every one of us have unconscious bias. According to Mahzari Banahi, an unconscious bias is a learned stereotype that's automatic, unintentional, but deeply, deeply rooted. We all have them, and they aren't going anywhere. Not all hope is lost, though. Now that I've introduced unconscious bias, I'll now talk about how this perpetuates stereotypes and how this gets pushed from pop culture, which gets imposed onto real people. In order to do this, I'll share one more story to illustrate my point. Around a year ago, I was FaceTiming a guy I was once friends with, and I asked him, "What was your first impression of me?" His response, "I thought you'd be like every other black girl at this school." After being very visibly offended, he went on to try to distract me from the comment by telling me how nice and level-headed and down-to-earth I was. Things I soon realized was, in his mind, the opposite of your typical black woman. It became very clear to me that black people aren't seen as individuals. We're seen as argumentative, loud, angry. That's it. When we're seen to be gentle or quiet or polite or warm, it's seen as some type of shock or relief. Or when we show any signs of originality, such as an alternative taste in music or fashion, it's seen as some type of glitch in the system. A lot of this comes all the way from slavery, of course. Removing the identity of slaves was always a conscious effort made by slave owners. Renamed from their culture, their language, being cut off from engaging in any of their own hobbies or interests or beliefs, this concept is nothing new. However, if legalized American slavery ended decades ago, how come this pattern is still occurring? Why in 2020 are we still seen in this light? The amount of things that factor into this are way more than I could even count, but I'd like to put a spotlight on something I see as one of the main perpetrators of this phenomenon: television. Tropes of fiction, sitcoms, and reality TV only further reinforce the stereotypes of loud black girl, angry black girl, and sassy black girl. It's like I only have 3 options. Because of this, black women all around the country feel the need to walk on eggshells when it comes to watching their resting facial expression, their tone of voice, or dealing with their emotions in general. Because in this society, a black woman's negative emotions make up their identity. So I've made the point that when you point out a black person going against black stereotypes, you're only further reinforcing those biases. So what's the path forward? This isn't meant to guilt you for seeing racial stereotypes. It's not even meant to suggest a solution as to how to get rid of them. That's something that would take decades of mental reconditioning and will not stop until racism comes to an end. Which, realistically, something none of us will ever live to see. And I'm not saying that everyone with these thoughts or even expressions are racist. I'm saying that we live in and are a product of a culture with a long history and strong social forces. Because of this, there's unconscious bias within all of us. And while we can't get rid of this unconscious bias, we can look past it. We need to have a conversation with ourselves when society plants one of these stereotypes into our minds, and a conversation with each other when we hear them out loud. So how exactly do we battle our unconscious bias, you may be wondering? There's professional training offered all around the country as to how to overcome this. However, I'd like to suggest a much simpler way as to how to begin in making this change. Take this into consideration. Not every single one of your thoughts are your thoughts. Meaning you do not own every single thought that comes into your mind because thoughts are not intentional. For example, I'm sure that when you were little, you at some point had it in your mind that pink was for girls and blue was for boys. Or that people with tattoos or piercings are rebellious. This wasn't an opinion you formed yourself or a conclusion you decided to come to. This was simply society planting this way of thinking into your mind. And while these thoughts are still in our minds to this day, that doesn't necessarily make them our opinion. We don't have to take ownership of these thoughts. It works the same way with race. If you were to see a black girl, and the first thing that unawarely comes to your mind is, oh, she's probably loud, aggressive, and not the brightest. Or if I were to see an Asian guy and think, oh, he's probably passive and smart, but not good at sports. That doesn't have to make either of us bad people. Like I said, this way of thinking is built into the ground that we walk upon. What's important is what you do with the thought. You could A, allow those thoughts to become your reality and treat people as their stereotypes, giving in to how white supremacists want us to operate. Or B, acknowledge the fact that the stereotype is in your mind, but not letting that existence of the thought become your opinion. And along with that, give everyone not only the benefit of the doubt, and not only an equal opportunity to make a good impression, but an equal shot in individuality despite someone's race or ethnic background. So I've examined the model minority. We've explored how this creates unconscious bias and how this perpetuates stereotypes. We talked about how these stereotypes get pushed from pop culture, and ultimately we looked at a solution. If we can admit to the ugly, uncomfortable biases that society puts into our minds, then we can learn how to confront those thoughts with courage and grace. As the great American author James Baldwin once said, "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced."